So hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728, and I wanted to talk about the hurdles that the US is likely to be facing in the coming 2020s. Speaking from 2020 December 25th. As usual, I am Earthling 64 yada yada yada. I am some random guy assembled from carbon atoms in the air into a carbon-based life form that has some of what other human beings consider to be several degrees. I have a military background. I've lost 85 pounds and kept it off for 5 years. I haven't been smoking for 5 years. I have traveled a bit. I'd like to travel some more depending on if I can get this vaccine. And that's it for me. So, what kind of hurdles is the US facing in 2021 and beyond? Well, some of the problems that the US has is a recession, basically. The US was probably going to have a recession at some point. It's been a long time since the last one. And this one that I guess we're in, you can say that we're in a recession right now. Um, is it? I don't know. Based on the actual definition, I think it's two consecutive quarters of negative growth. So I don't know if it really qualifies. But I think we can safely say that things are bad for the economy and people's jobs and being able to survive day to day for a lot of people. But I don't think that the US is out of it because, of course, the illness is still out there, as they say. And unfortunately, a lot of people have decided that they are not going to take the vaccine. Hopefully, it's a small number of people, but and it's small enough so that there can be herd immunity in the US and in the rest of the world for that matter. But unfortunately, the distribution of the vaccine is still going to take a while, regardless of even if everybody said they wanted to get it. And there are a couple other issues as well, some big ones. Number one, well, beyond the recession and the distribution of the vaccine, the US's reputation in the world has taken a hit as Mr. Trump has been in power. Oh, yeah, and I forgot other things with respect to Trump. But, the thing about it is that this isn't a new thing. From since Bush was in power and then Obama, before Obama, because there was an Obama bump, you can say, in terms of the reputation of the US in the world. There was an increase in respect and consideration, you could say, that the world had for the reputation of the US. Then it went up during the Obama years. And unfortunately, it continued on its downward trend once Trump was in power. So there's that. The next thing is that, there's still something like a month again before Trump is supposed to leave office. And there are, right now, I just looked at an article that said that there are discussions in the Pentagon as to what should take place or would take place if Mr. Trump were to decide to call a martial law to set that in place. And people, I think there was one person who anonymously said, in the 40 years of being in the military, they've never had those discussions before. And I would warrant in the 200 years of the US being a democracy, 200 excess years, because it's what, from 1776 to, so it's almost 250 years. I would imagine that nobody has had discussions as to if somebody were to force themselves, force the U.S. to keep them in power. As when I went looking for it, the U.S. is the oldest continuous democracy in the world. And when you look at the others, they are off. These are ex colonies of Britain that come up afterwards, many of them. And, if you're going to be an ex colony of Britain, it means that you haven't been independent quite that long, really. So the US is an aberration, really. And if someone can push the envelope quite this far to have all these people questioning whether or not the US will remain a democracy, or how to contend with it, especially since many of the people who are having the discussion probably voted for Mr. Trump. So it's interesting as to how those people might be sorting themselves out to say, hey, I am actually in favor of this. How can I find other people who I can trust that might be willing to put something on the line to get this contradictory result, to actually have these things come together? It doesn't really portend that well for the US in terms of the future, for me personally, the way I see it. Once you start going down that road, I don't think that you can really pull it back. You've set a precedent. That's what precedents are for. Precedents are to say, yeah, we can go this far, or maybe we can even go a little bit further. Some other concerns and issues and problems that the US has is that China was not shut down like the US. They don't have the freedoms that US citizens have, and they, as a result of that lack of freedom, their economy, just Wuhan shut down. I think maybe some other areas shut down as fast as they were infected. So in China, the economy has been working. People have been going out there, living, working, enjoying their life. All the surrounding countries surrounding China with their economies, maybe they would not have, people going back and forth, people from Vietnam, people from all of these other countries. But obviously, the world has had, in the same way that the respect for the US has been deteriorating, the respect that the world would have for China, for South Korea, for Taiwan, these countries would look like they know what they're doing, as opposed to the US. So in terms of the US's ability to have people listen, I'm sure if the US has the biggest military in the world, so people are going to listen regardless. But, are they going to listen without fear of that military? They're probably just going to listen in terms of, okay, we're afraid of what the US might do. We're afraid of whether or not they'll take money. But if the US says X, are we really going to believe it? Are we going to really back it? So there's that. Also, unfortunately, Mr. Trump was really very successful in reducing the immigration that the US has. And, contrary to what many people might believe, immigrants are free humans. They're not slaves. They do what they want, of course, but they bring the education, that they gained in whatever countries they came from, the business savvy. They bring the work, the ability to do work. You have a fully formed human being that in many cases is ready, willing, and able to, in very short order, start working, that needs a place to stay, that needs food to eat, that needs entertainment, and is basically you never had to educate this individual in terms of high school and elementary school and maybe even university. And if you did have to educate them, um, they were probably paying the US to educate them. They were paying to learn in the US, and then in short order, they are ready and willing, like I said, and able to begin work and expand the economy by consuming whatever goods and services are in the economy and giving the US, in many cases, somebody who is potentially a world famous, maybe they have like a doctorate or maybe they're an entertainer, or maybe they have a particular skill that someone in the US does not have. That's how many people come to the US. And by Mr. Trump basically strangling off that supply of people coming into the US, that does not help the US. The US is like the third most populous country on the planet. There is China, there's India, and there's the US. Let's go to an extreme. Let's cut the population of the US down to the population of Canada, which is about 38 million people. Would the US be as important? Would it be as powerful? No. And right now, the US's birth rate is not sufficient to maintain the population. It's really about immigrants and the children of immigrants that is continuing to increase the size of the US. And if, let's say, for example, Mr. Biden doesn't immediately try to change all of those restrictions and put them back, and beyond that, can you really, well, at this point, it really doesn't make any difference in terms of trying to reduce the number of people, or trying to reduce the number of infections in the US by restricting travel into the US. Most people in other countries are going to be afraid of people coming from the US to their country, as opposed to the other way around. So the US, if Biden, hopefully, as we expect, becomes the next president of the United States, and he starts to reverse some of these issues that Mr. Trump would have put up, these walls. The idea is that there should be no concern that people are going to bring COVID into the US. That is going to be a silly assertion if anybody makes that assertion and tries to restrict travel as a result of that into the US, for example. I mean, they shouldn't even bother to have, quarantines or anything like it, because the US is pretty much through and through full of COVID cases. So I can't imagine that even tens of thousands of COVID cases coming into the US really would change anything. Anyway, the US has a lot of issues that it needs to solve before they pile up and become, a serious problem. And I think a lot of these things are inevitable. So we probably have to deal with the aftermath and trying to reduce how bad they actually are. Anyway, feel free to like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, any of those things. Give me advice as to what I can improve on, etc. And have a good one.